You're listening to the Fayetteville 411 podcast, produced by the City of Fayetteville, where you will get information about city government and the programs and services we provide. You'll get topics of interest and an inside look into the various departments that help keep our city moving. I'm John Salling.
And I'm Sherry Kropp. Thanks for joining us for the Fayetteville 411. Well, as you know, February is Black History Month, and we wanted to take this time to highlight some of the notable African Americans who have played such a pivotal role in Fayetteville's history. We've got architects and builders, authors, and educators whose contributions are still present today. Fayetteville State University is a great example of that. So we invited Nichole Saint Leone with us. She's got a wealth of knowledge on Fayetteville's African American history and the history of Fayetteville State University. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know we're going to learn a lot today.
Oh, absolutely.
So what do you do with Fayetteville State?
Okay, well, I work as the archives technician for Fayetteville State University's Chestnut Library. It's named after Charles W. Chestnut, who was the second leader of the institution and an alumnus as well. And he later became a prolific national writer of African American fiction writing.
So he is one of those notables.
Yes.
We have a lot of them, but today we want to just focus on like the founders of Fayetteville State University and some of the history of Fayetteville State.
Okay.
So why don't we just dive on into it? Why don't you give us a little bit of background on Fayetteville State history?
Okay. Well, let's start with the church, if you will, because Evans Chapel, which now is known as Evans Metropolitan AME Zion Church off of North Cool Spring Street, is where the institution started, okay? Originally, you had two temporary schools that were in there. One was a daytime school for the youth, and the other one was a nighttime school for the newly freed African-American community, okay? And so what happened was that eventually there was a need to just have a more permanent institution. And so on November 29th, 1867, the Black citizens of Fayetteville gathered and designated 7 men to actually be the founders to entrust with essentially doing that purpose, okay? Their names are Andrew J. Chestnut, David A. Bryant, Robert H. Simmons, Matthew N. Leary Jr., Thomas Lomax, George W. Grange Sr., and Nelson Carter. And they paid for a lot of land off of Gillespie Street for that purpose. And they reached out to the Freedmen's Bureau to get the construction started on the school. So while the school was still being housed at the church, they were building the building that you normally would see on a lot of our promotional materials at Fayetteville State. Yes.
And where about on Gillespie Street was it?
So once you pass the Market House, once you pass Russell Street, you will see Cumberland County Jail on the right. Right next to it, you'll see a marker for Charles W. Chestnut, and it's actually that whole space all the way to the back of that area, which was actually where the Howard School once sat at. And then, interestingly enough, the trustees of the Howard School later on, the building that currently sits there now, that building was actually used as the African American library during segregation. It was very interesting to see that space was still being used in an educative manner for that purpose. Yes.
And it looks like it was really kind of a community movement, too, to get started.
Absolutely. The Howard School actually had multiple uses. Not only was it the education facility, but it was also a community center as well.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
And so they kind of funneled the money for the land?
Correct. They actually, a lot of the founders were already leaders in the community. Some of them were entrepreneurs or local businessmen with their businesses actually on Hay Street at time. And like Matthew N. Leary Jr., he took over his father's a horse accessory business, and they were known to be prominent businessmen around Person Street, Gillespie Street corridor, and also A.J. Chestnut, who was a local grocer as well. He also had his business around that space too. So it was very interesting to find that out, that they were not just in the community, but also in the business world era. Yes.
Yeah, I was looking through some of the notes about some of the founders, and they were community leaders, and a lot of them were in city government.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So a couple of them were appointed because of the Freedmen's Bureau coming in. And so A.J. Chestnut, you'll see him a lot. He actually ended up becoming a town commissioner. He served in that role briefly, and he was also justice of the peace, again, for a brief period of time. However, it was Robert H. Simmons who was also appointed to a position as the deputy sheriff of the town, as well as the town jailer. The town jail at the time was actually where Vicky's Biscuit Kitchen stands today.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Somewhere in that
Interesting.
space.
Interesting.
Yes. So it's very interesting to think about these landmarks from the past and seeing what was happened, to the town today. But you still see wonderful aspects of historical Fayetteville, even downtown. You also had like I said, not only that, but you also had some of them become members of the clergy. Like, it's very interesting to learn that Robert H. Simmons was once the town jailer, but then later he found his calling to preach in the ministry, and then he went to become a very prominent reverend in the Amy Zion Church. Yeah.
So from the Howard School location on Gillespie Street,
Correct.
Where did it go to after that?
So-
what happened next?
After A.J. Chestnut's son, Charles W. Chestnut, left, another principal was appointed named Ezekiel Ezra Smith, also known as E.E. Smith. And he saw that there was a need to have this school grow, and so he started reaching out to some of the other African-American businessmen in the community. There used to be a silk mill right there where there is a Mayflower storage facility. That's just what's left of it. But it was a massive silk mill plant, and it hired a lot of African Americans, and he made a deal to have the students to do textile work in one of the warehouses. So going into the later part of the 1800s, like the 1890s, he had the school kind of housed in 3 different locations. So the first one was the Howard School. The second one was the Ashley Bailey Silk Mill, okay? And then the third place was actually right behind the Howard School on Worth Street. They were able to reach out to the Royal Knights of King David, which was a trade-based African-American fraternal order who did things like barber and things like that. And so those 3 locations were kind of like working simultaneously until him, as well as a butcher named Edward N. Williams, who ran his butcher store in the Market House, and a gentleman named Dr. P.N. Melker, and some others put their money together and buy a piece of land outside of the city limits at the time in 1907, which was a farmland, and they established where we see Fayetteville State today there in 1908.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right.
When Fayetteville State University, or I don't even know if it was called it back then, maybe it was still the Howard School,
Okay.
when they purchased the property there on Murkison Road.
Yes.
How many buildings were there? How many students were actually there whenever that first built? Do you know?
So, yes, we actually have our catalogs from back then. So we can see that some of the earliest buildings included from 1908. The first building built there was the Aycock building. And then you had Vance Hall. You also had a girls' dormitory. Eventually, you had some of the more familiar old campus buildings like the H.L. Cook Dining Hall. And so you did have about several buildings there. And then we kind of explode going into the 1920s when we finally, it's interesting, Dr. E.E. Smith, we learned that he actually would have, just so that way the students would be able to have a space on campus, he actually opened up his own house to the students. And so it wasn't until the mid-1920s when he actually get his official president's house, which still sits on our campus today. It's essentially one of our oldest buildings. Yes.
And taking a time lapse from
Sure.
there to now, how many students are at Fayetteville State University? Wow, it has really grown.
Yes, we actually have a record-breaking 7,100 students. That is amazing considering that the population back then was probably under, honestly, 150 students. And so that just shows you the educational legacy of the university, and that it still continues to provide a service to the community, for the community, and you kind of see this wonderful positive feedback loop of it, just, being a wonderful part of the city of Fayetteville and the Cumberland County region. Yes.
Let's also talk about some of its impact on the community, what some of the alumni were getting up to here.
Yes, absolutely. So you had early alum such as Edward Evans, who becomes the first principal of the Orange Street School off of Orange Street, and that helps build out that community. But also in the county space, you have Ann Chestnut, who at the time she was the county supervisor of the schools designated for Black children during segregation. And she was known to go in and personally assist with purchasing book orders, things of that nature, for to make sure that everybody had their supplies as needed. Yes.
And there's actually a middle school named after her.
Yes,
in
that's
her
right. It
honor.
originally
Yeah.
was a high school, and then it got turned into a middle school.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
All right. And as we move kind of further up in American history, what were some of the effects that we saw this university have on our community?
Oh, yes. So the students, especially in the post-World War II era, were really empowered by the double V victory at home and abroad. And so some of them started to be inspired by a lot of the more national events going on in the civil rights movement era in the 1950s and going into the 60s. And so early on in 1960, just after the sit-ins in Greensboro, a group of Fayetteville State students were interested in doing that too. But unfortunately, they weren't really able to get it off the ground completely. But they revisit this with the class of 63 and many other Fayetteville State Teachers College students participating in the Summer of 63 demonstrations downtown. And this is where the Fayetteville Observer, we can see multiple pictures of possibly hundreds, if not thousands of students just going down there, doing various organized sit-ins, sit-outs, going up to the local movie theaters and requesting intentionally to buy tickets that were for the designated sitting spaces for the white community because they were trying to protest. And at first it was not met well. However, they started to win over some of the business people and, of course, some of the local leaders because they organized themselves and start to do discussions on how can we, meet them halfway, or how can we, deal with the scenario. And so, in conjunction with not just the local businessmen, but also the Fayetteville NAACP chapter, you start to have this biracial committee form, and they ultimately, because of the students at Fayetteville State University, lead to early desegregation efforts in Fayetteville prior to the signing of the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Okay, and those are some of the markers and signs that we see around downtown too.
Yes,
though.
that's right. So right there in front of the Fascinate You Children's Museum, back in the summer of 2023, the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission provided Fayetteville, the city of Fayetteville, with a wonderful North Carolina Civil Rights Trail marker to acknowledge that. And I think that's just so powerful to see that, especially in what was originally that city hall after the Market House stopped being as a city hall.
Right.
Yes.
And we've got so many of our city council members and commissioners that have their alumni.
Yes, exactly. Of course, Mayor
Yes,
Mitch
yes.
Colvin is a wonderful alumni. We actually had a lot of alumni become the first at Fayetteville within, or even the county level with the Cumberland County Commissioners, such as Mary McAllister, the Honorable, God rest her soul. She was the first in her time when she was there. But then, of course, she inspired other alumni to pursue it, like Cumberland County Commissioner Dr. Jeanette M. Council. And to see that, and just to see kind of us doing, interestingly enough, what the founders were doing, over 150 years ago, is really powerful to see.
And I would imagine that the founders had no idea how this was going to grow and be what it is today.
No, it's very interesting. The last founder alive actually was Andrew Jackson Chestnut. And so he was a part of the group of alumni and other interested people that were looking to sell the Howard School, I guess, to help raise funds for the State Normal School, which was Fayetteville State's previous name after the Howard School. It was the next name going forward. And so for him, he used to, according to his daughter, Ann Chestnut, some of the letters that we have of hers and, from family members who wrote to her, they were like, we remember when your father would talk about the history of the region and how things were, or this is what happened to Wilmington Road. And so I think he would really would have loved, and of course all the founders really, but I think he especially would have loved to see what the campus looks like today and how we're really making an impact, not with just the city of Fayetteville and Cumberland County, but really the world, honestly. Yes.
The various names of the school. It started as Howard.
Yes, the Howard School.
And then
the state colored normal school.
Right, and it was that for how long?
Okay, so the Howard School and then the state colored normal school is from 1877, and then we kind of have little variants of that because we kind of introduce different things such as agriculture. So we become at one point the state colored normal and industrial school, and that was around like the 1910s, if you will. And then we kind of go back to the state normal school by the 1920s until 1939, which we are then turned into Fayetteville State Teachers College as we are allowed to officially give out teaching degrees, 4-year teaching degrees.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm glad you explained that because when you read the history, you see all of the different the names of the school and trying to put the connection together.
Right.
But ultimately, they all add up to be Fayetteville State University.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As we go into Black History Month here, do you have a favorite couple of events that the university's putting together here?
Yes. Well, I would be, I'm not going to lie, I'm pretty biased, but I'm really excited about the event being hosted by the library. We're actually doing 2 things. The first of which is the 2025 annual North Carolina Genealogy Conference, and that is hosted with the African American Historical Genealogical Society, along with Fayetteville State's history faculty. So if you would like more information, please reach out to the Department of History at Fayetteville State through their website. However, Chestnut Library, we are, of course, going to be doing a wonderful exhibition, the first of which is called FSU in the News, which is about 150 years worth of newspaper articles relating to Fayetteville State history, all the way back to 1887.
That'll be interesting.
So that will be free to the public, and that's on our 4th floor where I'll be at. So if you see me, say hello, and that will be open during general library hours, including weekends too. So Saturdays and Sundays, you're looking for something to learn about African American history, feel free to come to the library. You can park right in front of the parking lot. Yes.
And so is the library open to the public? Can anyone just go in at any time and get a wealth of information from you?
Yeah, so they can walk in. I'm also free to take appointments too. We actually do offer certain community services, like they are allowed to utilize the computers. The only thing is we just can't have printing because, again, that's assigned, designated to Fayetteville State-based community members. However, if they want to come upstairs and ask me any Fayetteville history-related questions, they're more than welcome to. Sometimes I'm hanging out with other history professors as they're doing research, and so it's a great conversational time. But feel free to come and check that out, as well as our other exhibit, which is going to be on the FSU leaders I discussed, Charles Chestnut, as well as his father AJ will be a part of this. But the other leader I was going to mention is George H. Williams. He will also have his materials, his family's materials on display as well. So this is going to be a really exciting event for that. And that's going to be throughout the month of February. And then the last but not least is there are several other panels and workshops that we have that our Department of History professors are working on and will be presenting to the public. And then last but not least, we do have a basketball game. So if you're interested in that, you can always go to the FSU ticket office for that. Yeah.
Is there a website that people can visit to get all of the information about the various events?
Yes. So the website that you would actually go to for Fayetteville State University, it would be through our marketing and communications. I believe we've renamed it to the Office of Strategic Communications.
Okay.
So
that sounds more important.
Yes. So they are very cool, and we'll be able to direct you to any department of interest that you're interested in that particular event. Yes.
Thank you so much for being our guest.
Thank you.
That's going to wrap it up for this episode of the Fayetteville 411. The Fayetteville 411 is one of several podcasts that the city produces for our podcast channel, Radio Fayetteville. Be sure to subscribe to Radio Fayetteville, available on most of your favorite podcast streaming platforms.
You can also listen to every podcast that Radio Fayetteville has to offer by downloading the Fay TV streaming app, available now on Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, and Amazon Fire TV. You can view all of our video content by visiting faytv.net. To get information about city services, go to our webpage at fayettevillenc.gov. Thanks for joining us.